Okay, so I'd like to introduce our next session. John Rasmussen is the IT internal control lead and supervisor here at DTNA. He's based here in Portland. He also serves as a certified mental health first aid instructor for the Lyft EBRG, and he helps equip employees with practical tools to support colleagues and connect them to the right resources when it matters most. So today, John will lead us through a short TED style session titled Check In Before They're Checked Out. And the focus is simple here, but certainly important with what he'll share with us. And it really starts with us checking in with ourselves and then with our team. So, and that's the foundation, certainly, for us to have a healthy culture in finance and a critical step for us preventing burnout for ourselves, but also for our team. So, ask you all to certainly listen and see what we learn here. I know John will share some really good tips with us and to keep what we learn here in mind. So, John, I will go ahead and I'll turn it over to you. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, and thank you for having me and the team for listening. It's a very exciting thing. This is one of my favorite things to do, and I love to do it whenever I can. So, as I guess next slide maybe. So, as finance professionals, right, you deal with risk mitigation, forecasting, and asset protection every single day, and you know that an unmitigated risk or a system that's left unmonitored is going to lead to catastrophe, right, in time. And so today I want to talk about a massive risk and an asset that often flies under the radar until it's too late, and that's our people. And included in our people is ourselves, right, as leaders and otherwise, right? Specifically, the hidden liability of employee burnout. And when people burn out, it's not just a magical weekend. It's not just a 2 week trip somewhere. It can be a 3 year long journey to get back to baseline. So that's 3 years you're not growing. That's 3 years you're not developing. That's 3 years where your productivity has been cut by about 60% and more. So before we get to that point, before people check out, before people burn out, uh, this is something that we need to do is check in. So on your teams, but as well as yourself, and it is a structural necessity. It is more than just a nice to have thing. It is more than filler. It is a requirement. So today I will be going over a series of questions. Each slide is just going to have a question on it. And what I'd like you to do is answer in your mind silently for yourself first, right? I'll give some space and then we will dig in further. So to start, here's a question researchers at Harvard have been using to measure human resilience for nearly a century. And that is, who would you call in the middle of the night if you were sick or afraid? So let's give a brief moment for everyone to think about that. And really let that question sink in. It's pretty heavy. And it's a simple question, but they identified that it was a cornerstone of the Harvard study of adult development. And this involved tracking hundreds of individuals across the socioeconomic spectrum within Boston over 8 decades. So over 8 decades, they followed the same people and saw how they developed, gave them the same surveys. They wanted to find out, what is beneficial to our health and our happiness. And the data yielded a powerful correlation. Individuals who had a definitive answer to this question, in particular, with close connections, regardless of their economic position, they lived longer, they had healthier lives, and they resisted chronic midlife diseases far better than those who were isolated or exhibiting symptoms of loneliness. So, why does this matter for burnout prevention? Because burnout is fundamentally a state of prolonged, unmanaged physiological and emotional stress. And the Harvard data revealed that a trusting relationship acts as a physical buffer. So, when you're highly stressed, talking to someone who listens well will literally calm your nervous system down at a microscopic level. And without that buffer, stress accumulates into a chronic load. And this is going to accelerate the physical damage and psychological burnout. A lack of connection is a stressor. It's instinctual that isolation is a survival risk. And it's going to make issues bigger, And I think we can imagine that, right? Yet, as people grow older, as we get into our lives, the hyper independence and expectations and pressure, they make us mask. Friendships fade, social spheres shrink, and it's more and more probable that people, especially as they age in their lives, are going to experience loneliness. And with that in mind, here we are in person together at this office, and we treat our time and presence at work as this rigid circumstance. I'm not someone who's going to say this is a family. There's family and there's work, but we're first and foremost human beings in this building, and these walls that we've built are often built out of fear, right? Of maybe being vulnerable or trusting. And so we can't solve this crisis overnight, but as leaders, we can build the preventative infrastructure to help mitigate it within our scope, within our boundaries. But how do we start? Well, we start with listening. So on the next slide here, we have a much more familiar, maybe seemingly less heavy question, right? How was your weekend? So I'm going to give everybody a few moments to really answer it in their own minds. How was your weekend? It's not as heavy, but I'll argue that the small talk like this has potential power and significance if it's asked earnestly and with intent. In a fast-paced environment, it's easy to treat this as white noise or filler. And it's only white noise or filler if you don't care what the answer is, right? But what they found, and behavioral science proves that small talk is an essential tool for emotional regulation. So there was a doctor, Nicholas Epley, he did a research on train commuters who were riding to work and showed that people systematically suffer from what he called the misunderstanding of connection. We predict that sitting in solitude will preserve our energy, and we assume that others want to be left alone as well. But when participants were pushed to engage in basic small talk with other passengers on the train, they reported significantly happier moods, less sadness, and more energy as well. And I want to highlight that there's a mutual benefit. If I'm engaging in the small talk, I'm feeling something, they're getting something, and there's this connection, right? And when you decide to have these connections, your life benefits in ways that are great and not insignificant. So the initial speed bump is of starting a conversation is really the only barrier, right? As people leaders, this question is your small talk is going to be your lowest cost to benefit tool for burnout prevention. It allows you to catch the subtle shifts in your team members' baseline before they crash. And so doing your rounds, having your small talk, but before you ask it next Monday morning, you have to use it as a mirror. So when you ask yourself, how was my weekend, right? How am I doing? Like, how am I actually doing, right? If you're running on empty and you're hiding your own stress and pushing through a state of chronic exhaustion, you won't have the bandwidth or the clarity to really notice other people slipping. But at the same time, there's a mutual benefit. So just engaging and building these connections is going to be a benefit for everybody. So let me challenge you if you've ever asked someone, how are you doing? I would just be fully prepared for maybe what an honest answer is. The default's going to be, I'm okay. But imagine if someone looked at you and said, actually, I'm really struggling right now. This past weekend was not very good. There was quite a bit going on. And most of the time, people may not say anything at all, but you can sense it. You can't quite label it. You don't know, with something in your gut saying it. And there's that hesitation to, how would I dig further on that? And this all comes from intent. So if you ask and you're ready for where it may lead, you're making space and time for it each day with your direct reports. There's a mutual benefit for you. And if you sense something's wrong, I think the best question you're going to ask is, hey, it seems like something's on your mind, right? That's a beautiful question. Almost no one you're going to ask is going to be hesitant to divulge something and take it in a private place. But really, if you sense something, always reach out. And again, checking on yourself, you could be the person who pauses long enough to ask. And the hard reality is also, you may be the only person in their circle to ask, right? You may be the only person who's going to ask how they're doing. And so treat it like that. Be prepared, take care of yourself. and establish this baseline for ourselves and our teams. And I want to point out real quick one of our misunderstood questions on the employee engagement surveys, right? So on the next slide here is, do you have a best friend at work? When this question appears on employee surveys, and when I was a supervisor, I had about 200 employees. People would often roll their eyes or not understand it. They think I'm here to build the truck, I'm here to manage, I'm not here to make friends. Again, it's good to have healthy boundaries within work, with where you're comfortable. But what Gallup realized is that this is a critical indicator of job retention and burnout prevention. Because again, burnout thrives in isolation. So if a worker is overwhelmed, alone, and in an environment devoid of trust or some sort of significant friendship, there's going to be performance dip, and you're going to have this isolation, right? And conversely, Gallup found that employees with the workplace best friend are significantly more likely to share ideas, innovate, support others, and create this safe environment for all. So why is this? Because a work friend acts as an emotional release valve. They're the person you can ask the dumb questions to without the fear of looking incompetent. And they offer judgment-free encouragement when workflows are crushing, and they just make the day more sustainable, right? And currently, only 2 in 10 Americans report having a best friend at work. So that means 80% of our workforce is operating without an internal support system, leaving them highly vulnerable to burnout. And organizations who see this and encourage it see a massive lift in satisfaction, a sharp drop in turnover, and also healthier workplace boundaries and burnout prevention. So let's take the deep protective insight from the Harvard study from earlier and reframe it a little bit for this last question I've got, and make it an actionable asset for your group today. So on the next slide here is, who would you speak with in the middle of the workday if you needed support, right? And I want to challenge every people leader in this room today. If your team member was asked this question, who would you speak with in the middle of a workday if you needed support? The answer unequivocally needs to be, at a minimum, your name, right? They should be able to say that you're that person. And ideally, they should have a list of the entire team as a result of the culture that you're perpetuating, enforcing, encouraging, and building. One that's built on trust and psychological safety. And small talk isn't small talk at all. It's not small at all, actually. Small talk is not small at all. It's your diagnostic tool. It's your burnout prevention program. It should be something you're doing throughout the day. It should be something you do in the mornings. And if you're only checking out on people when there's mistakes or deadlines that are missed, or when there's something compromised, your intervention is reactive, right? We all can agree, I believe, that proactive is better than reactive. And how you're doing that by being someone who approaches others, who overcomes that barrier, who is checking in on themselves, is coming from a place where I can say, I'm stressed today. I'm going to do some things to regulate, have people I can talk with, so I can be that fortress of support for your people. And again, we need to check in before they're checked out by cultivating this team environment where it's safe to be human, right? Safe to voice your stress, safe to say, I'm running on empty. We don't just protect our bottom line, we mitigate this tremendous risk of burnout. We build a sustainable, resilient workplace that keeps our people whole, right? And if you're unsure on how to do this, I highly recommend receiving mental health first aid certification, right? Which builds your confidence in the area of what are good boundaries to have. When I do engage with people, how much support can I give them? What resources are available that I can give people? It can feel overwhelming, and it's not a character judgment to say that it is. So this is life-saving training, and if you want to learn more about that, please message me, and we'll see if we can do something this year, or I will align you with trainers to do it. It's not very expensive either. So let's get over the speed bump. Let's ask the question, and let's build this connection to prevent burnout together. And thank you again, everybody. That's my talk. And later today, Tiffany Chen will continue the burnout prevention conversation on tools you can use to manage your workload with AI and more. So again, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you, John.